Hello again, watch fans. Welcome back. Today, I'd like to talk about three watches that I call value dress casual. In other words, they can be worn as a dress watch, they can be worn as a casual watch, and they all offer good value for the money. The watches are the Ernest Borel Automatic. This is from about 2005. The second one is the Rotary Limited Edition from about 2007. And the third one is the Hamilton Khaki Automatic. This is a current model. And before I continue, just want to say a shout out to my friend Isaac. Isaac let me borrow the Hamilton. I've had my eye on it for quite a while. It's a beautiful watch. Isaac, no doubt, has good taste. So thanks, Isaac. Appreciate the lending. And let's get on with the review. One of the great things about reviewing a watch is that you get to learn about the brand's history. Some brands obviously have more of a pedigree or horological history than others. Some go back several centuries, some just a century, and some are just into the last century, the 20th century. In any case, it is one of the fun parts, and I enjoy that very much. So, with that in mind, let's start with the Borel. The Burrell is a brand that got its start in 1856. Founded by Jules Borel in Neuchâtel, Switzerland. In 1859, his brother-in-law Paul Courvoisier and he joined up into a partnership. And in 1860, they had their first batch of watches and clocks that were exported to Uruguay, of all places. In 1866, let's see, they won first prize in Neuchâtel Observatory. This was after they established their presence in the Latin American market. 1875, they got more awards, also from the observatory in Neuchâtel. 1876, they received the Certificate of Award for Watch and Pocket Chronographs in Philadelphia. 1878, they received the Paris Gold Medal. And I guess that's when they invented their crown winding. 1894, Jules retired. He was the founder, as I said, and he was succeeded by his son, Ernest. And that is the name that they have to this day, Ernest Borel. 1898, that's when they changed the name of the company to Ernest Borel. They kept on improving their manufacturing capabilities and their precision. 1903 is when they first established their relationship with China. That's the beginning of the Asian market that they have to this day, and actually that's where they've really concentrated on in the last decade or so. 1936, they modernized production, and the son Jean-Louis took over. 1937, they won the Greek Grand Prix. 1945 to 59, they were making COSC certified watches. These are the Swiss regulatory agency that has very, very exacting standards. 1946, they had a new factory because they have more demand. 1997, they set up their brand in Le Chaux-de-Fonds in Switzerland. They joined the Federation of Swiss Watch Industry in 2005, and to this day, China is their largest market. which goes back almost a century. So that's the history of Borel. Let's talk about this Burrell watch that we have in front of us. So this Burrell, really attractive Burrell Date model. I purchased this about 2005. It was my first automatic mechanical watch. I didn't know much about watches. I did some research, and I thought that Burrell was a good brand, and not that expensive, but still quality. You can see that it's very, very nicely polished on the sides. It's got that Burrell logo on the back. There's a story about this little logo, which is a pair of, I think the way it goes is a pair of dancing lovers that, there it is again, the little logo, the dancing lovers, that goes back about a century, I think, into the 1920s when they first came up with that. So this is it's the model GS7200. It's a diameter of 32 millimeters. It's really kind of small by not only today's standards, but even traditional watch standards. 32 millimeter diameter, 10 millimeter thick. The lug width is 17 millimeter. The lug to lug is 40, so it's a very short watch. 42-hour power reserve, 50 meter water resistance. Sapphire front crystal, screw down case back. It even has a screw down crown, and if you look at the crown, you can see, if I get it just right, the angle, it's a signed crown. It's got their little logo on there. It's got a ETA 2824-2 movement. Complications include the date and a Cyclops to magnify the date. And I think I paid about $300 for it in 2005. So what do I like? Well, I like the fact that it's a great movement. It's no secret that the ETA 2824 has been around for several decades. It's a very robust, strong movement. Comes in different grades. I couldn't find out what grade movement is in this watch. It's nicely finished. Does have hand winding and hacking, and I think I would call this sporty, but elegant. And that is the Burrell. Rotary was founded in 1895 by Moshe Dreyfus in La Chaux-de-Fonds, Switzerland. In fact, it's still even owned to this day by the Dreyfus Group. So it's one of the few remaining independent watch companies. As you probably know, many watch companies over the last 10, 20 years have been subsumed into larger and larger companies. Companies like the Swatch Group, Richemont, they're buying watch companies all the time. So Rotary is still independent. 1907, it opened up their UK office. In 1925, they came out with their logo, which is a winged wheel. You can see it a little bit on the watch here at the top, right there. Really an attractive logo, I think. Classy, for sure. In 1934, they came out with their first shockproof watch. 1940, they were appointed the official watch supplier of the British Army. Now, this information is from their own website, so I don't know if they were the only supplier to the British Army or one of the official suppliers to the British Army. But in any case, they must have been a worthwhile brand to have that designation and supply watches. 1942 was their first automatic. 1973 was their first quartz watch. In 1987, the fourth generation, Dreyfus, Robert Dreyfus, took over. And that's about all the history I could find on Rotary. So this is the Rotary automatic, model 3256. I really like the complications on this. The day on the bottom and the date below that, kind of like the inverse of how the Hamilton has that at the top, and of course Rolex has their version as well. This is the diameter is 36 millimeters. Let me just give you a shot of the polishing on the side. Nicely shaped case there. The crown is not signed. It's got a exhibition back. Very nice. This is Rotary. Did their own custom. And this is the Rotary Special Edition from 2007. Yeah, the rotor is really nice there. Champagne dial, dolphin hour and minute hand. A very minimalist minute track around the outer circumference. Let's see, 36 millimeter diameter, 10 millimeter thick. Lug width is a standard 20 millimeter, so straps can easily be purchased to change out. Lug to lug is 43 millimeters, so it's still kind of small, not as small as the Ernest Borel, but still kind of small side. 50 millimeter water resistant. It's an ETA 2836-2 movement. Front crystal is sapphire. It's got a sapphire case back, the exhibition case back crystal. And as you saw, it has a day and date complication. And this one is gold over steel. This was from about 2007, and also sold for about $300, I believe. So I think it's a real classic look. It's really not just classical, but classy. More of a dress watch, I think, than the Borel. I like the fact that it's elegant, and it's got a great ETA movement. Things I don't like, just a couple things, maybe minor. One is that the pedigree isn't so great. Rotary is more or less a European brand. You don't really see too many in the United States. And I find that sometimes when it's on the wrist, it's a little bit difficult to read. And if you look closely at the champagne dial with the gold-colored hands, sometimes there's not enough contrast to get the time at first glance. But otherwise, look at that. That's just That's just class, I think. So that is the Rotary Special Edition, 3256. Finally, at least in this review, we have the Hamilton. This is the Hamilton H704450, Hamilton automatic. So Hamilton may have perhaps the most storied history of the three. It was founded in 1892 in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. As early as 1912, they were associated with the railroads. And just a brief sidebar here on railroads and watches. Up until about the 1880s, I believe, there were hundreds of time zones all across the United States. And it made having train schedules and running trains on time very difficult and quite unsafe. In fact, there are some well-known crashes that occur because the times were confused on trains coming from different directions on the same track. So about sometime in the 1880s, I believe, early 1880s, 1883-ish, if my memory is correct, the railroads got together and they came up basically with two things. One was they came up with standard time zones. That's why we have, at least where I am in northern New Jersey in the United States, Eastern Time, New York, obviously, and the other time zones across the country, so that no longer does every town and hamlet have its own time zone. The second thing that was done, and again, this was the railroads primarily because they were the ones that were the best beneficiary of this, is that railroads came up with their own specifications on the quality and standards of watches. Now, at the time, again, this is in the 1880s, 1890s, even the first decade of the 1900s, the railroads made sure, worked with various companies, one of which was Hamilton, another one was Ball, the Ball Watch Company, and a few others. And they worked with the companies to have the companies produce watches, pocket watches, to the standards of the railroad company. And at first, anyway, the pocket watches were the property of the railroad company itself. They would maintain their accuracy. They would issue them to locomotive engineers and conductors and other train employees. And I think I've read that like every week, the watches were turned in to be checked for their accuracy. So it was a big deal, a big thing. Several watch brands were involved, and Hamilton was one of the first ones to partake in that association with the railroad industry. In 1914, Hamilton became a supplier of watches to the U.S. Army, to the U.S. Armed Forces, actually, not just the Army. In 1928, they introduced their Piping Rock and Yankee watch. 1942, Hamilton began modernizing their supply chain and their manufacturing capability, especially with their marine chronometers that they made and supplied to the U.S. Navy. 1957, Hamilton came out with the first electric watch, the Ventura. 1961, Elvis Presley wore his Ventura in the famous movie Blue Hawaii. So if you're an Elvis fan, I'm sure you've seen it. Even if you're not, Elvis popularized that watch. That's even to this day, a Hamilton Ventura looks so futuristic. 1970, Hamilton had the first LED digital watch. 1971, they had one of the first chronographs launched. It was called the Pan Europe. In 1974, I mentioned earlier about watch companies being bought out by bigger watch companies and those being bought out by bigger watch companies. Well, in 1974, Hamilton was bought by the Swatch Group. In the 1990s, there were more, throughout the 1990s actually, there were more movie appearances. For example, you've seen Hamilton watches in Lethal Weapon, Men in Black, and several others. And then in the 2003, they moved their production and their headquarters to Biel, Switzerland. So in the 2000s and even into the second century of the 21st century, Hamilton has become a leading brand in the $500 to $1,500 market. And I think most people that are into watches, either collectors or enthusiasts, are familiar with the various Hamilton watches. In fact, surprisingly, and this is just a coincidence, I am wearing right now a Hamilton Khaki mechanical. This is a hand wind Hamilton that I like very much, and I have it on a 2-piece NATO. I think it's just right. So anyway, that's a coincidence. I wasn't wearing that for this review. I just realized looking down, oh, I'm wearing a Hamilton. What do you know? Anyway, that's the Hamilton, that's their history. And I'm looking at the watch itself. So, as I mentioned earlier, this is the Hamilton H704450 automatic. The Khaki automatic. I think this is just a gorgeous watch. I've had my eye on this for quite a while. It's going to enter my collection at some point. Look at that second hand. That red tip second hand. Getting a little reflection there. And, well, so let me talk about the specs. It's 38 millimeter diameter, so it's the largest of these three. It's 10.9 millimeters thick, 20 millimeter lug width, so easy to get straps in that 20 millimeter size if you want to change out straps. Lug to lug is 46.7, so not very big, but again, the largest of the three. Beautiful black dial. Wow. And it's maybe hard to see. It's sort of a mini pie pan dial. If you can, there we go. You see how right where the 24-hour markers are, if you look at the circumference of that, you can see that it's raised a little bit. There you go. You can see it now. What a classy watch. I just love this watch to death. Let's see, water resistance is 100 meters. Does not have a screw down crown. Front crystal is sapphire. It's slightly domed. I don't know if you can see that. Just a little bit, slightly domed. Nicely polished case. Look at that. And again, this is not my watch. It belongs to Isaac. Isaac takes very good care of his watches. And it's not focusing. There we go. See, it's got the Hamilton H signed crown. If you can see that a little better there. Sometimes it's hard with the angle of my lighting here. It's making me a little bit dizzy. Okay. All right. Let's see. And of course, it's got the date complication. One thing I like about it is that there's no Cyclops. I find watches with Cyclops very difficult to read. You got to be right at the exact angle to see it, and so I'm glad this watch doesn't have that. And I think the street price of this watch is about $350. So it's a current model, so it's in the same range as the others. But I think it's both both sporty and dressy. I think this could pass either for your weekend sport watch, if you're smartly dressed, or even a t-shirt and jeans. I mean, you can be smartly dressed with t-shirt and jeans. Or I can see wearing this to the office like I did for the last week. So it's not that thick, so it can easily slide under the cuff. My work environment is pretty much business casual, so I do wear nice long sleeve shirts, but usually khakis or something like that. So this fits in right with that. I don't know how it would look with a tux, but the last time I wore a tux, I think, was many decades ago, so I don't know. Anyway, that's the Khaki automatic from Hamilton. And just take a look at the exhibition case back of the Hamilton. This is really, I think, a class act. Let me get a good picture of that there. The Hamilton signed rotor. It is a 28-24, but they did a nice job on that rotor, and you get a good look at the movement. I could look at a watch movement all day long. There we go. There's the ticking heart. Balance wheel. So that's the exhibition case back on the Hamilton Khaki automatic. I like the look of it. I like the aesthetic. I like the workmanship. Very readable with those white letters on the black dial. I like the fact that it has 24-hour time. I'm gradually training myself to learn how to read time in 24-hour time. The dial isn't really busy. I mean, it does say Hamilton across the top, and it's got Khaki automatic on the bottom, but I wouldn't say that that's overly busy. I think it's just right. Let's take a look at the accuracies of these three watches. The first one is the Borel, and as you can see on the time grapher here, it's roughly 3 seconds per day fast. I had it recently serviced. I had a full service done on it about, I don't know, 3 or 4 months ago. When it came back from service, it was 1 second per day. So I guess in the 3 or 4 months since then, it's gotten a little bit faster, but still definitely very good accuracy. The Rotary isn't quite as good. The Rotary has an accuracy of about plus 7 seconds per day. One thing to notice here is the 0.0 millisecond variation. That means that when the balance wheel swings back and forth, it's going equal distance on both sides. So that's why that's 0.0 up on the top line of the time grapher. And also you see the line, the plotted line that's going across diagonally from left to right. It almost looks like it's one line. If there was a variation in the distance of either side of the balance wheel going back and forth, you would see a separation in those lines. So still very good accuracy. Plus 7 seconds is fantastic, and you can see it's very consistent. And then we have the Hamilton. This really surprised me. This is minus 19 seconds per day, so it's slow. This thing definitely needs to be regulated. I did demagnetize all the watches before I wore them, and after I wore them, and before I put them on the time grapher. So the fact that, a couple things looking at this time grapher readout. Again, this is also 0.0 millisecond variation, so the swing back and forth of the balance wheel is equal on both sides. That's why the line is looks like a single line, because it's right on top of each other. That's a good thing. The 280-degree amplitude is also a very good sign, and very, very strong, very strong. You want it somewhere in the 250 to 300 range, and there's no problem with the amplitude in this watch. Just like there's no problem with the beat error. But it is a little bit troubling, the rate, the accuracy. So I think this watch needs to be regulated, and it can be, because it's a 28-24 movement, and that can be taken to any competent watchmaker or watchsmith, and they can regulate it down to. I mean, the Burrell, as you saw, the Burrell has the same movement, 28-24, and that was 3 seconds plus 3 seconds per day. So 28-24s can be regulated quite well. So this one needs it. Other than that, it's got very good numbers. So what are my conclusions? Well, of these three watches, I think they all could pass for dress watches, for sure. I think the Borel and the Hamilton could also pass for a casual watch. I'm not sure the Rotary would, unless you maybe have a sport coat and a nice pair of pants and a nice pair of shoes, then maybe the Rotary could be casual. But I think the Rotary is more of a dress watch than the other two. All about the same price. And I've worn them all. I actually, as I mentioned, the Borel is mine, the Rotary is mine, the Hamilton is borrowed. I'm actually I think I'm gonna sell the Borel. As much as I like it, it's just a little bit too small for me. I think it'd be wonderful as a ladies' watch or a man with a small wrist. Classy looking watch, good quality, not so much of a horological pedigree, but actually more than Borel is more than Rotary, and of course Hamilton has that kind of a storied past. So I like them all. They all can be worn in the office. They can be worn for dress. The Rotary and Hamilton, since they have standard 20 millimeter lug width, easy to change out. I don't particularly like the strap on the Hamilton. If it was mine, I would change the strap out. I think Isaac did the same thing. He just put it back on the original strap to let me borrow it. The Burrell's got that very narrow 17 millimeter strap, and Burrell was the 17 millimeter strap, which is a little tough to find. So I think I'm going to sell the Burrell when this review is finished, and I'm also going to sell the Rotary because I don't really dress up that much. The odd funeral or odd wedding I go to once or twice a year is about all I do. So I have plenty of nice dress watches for those occasions, which I do wear. So the Rotary is leaving my collection, as is the Burrell. And sometime in the future, the Hamilton will join. So that's it. That's the casual dress watches I wanted to review and present these three watches. And I think they're all good value. Any one of them they're all great watches. So thanks for watching. Thanks again for my friend Isaac for letting me borrow the Hamilton. I think it sort of stole the show here. Although that Burrell, wow, you don't see Burrell too much anymore in the U.S. They've really focused on Asia, and I don't think they even have any presence in the U.S. Although they may in some small high, some cities with high population, like New York or Los Angeles or something. So anyway, that's it. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.